Gilg Jew, Gilg J as Gil Nerach.
Sé Claare na Gael and Claare Shaws, Babaliam Usaldacha. This is Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert de Carslach.
Have you ever heard tell of old Bobby Bob?
And in this bilingual programme, you'll hear me saying some things in the English language, as nears clash and me grey cústarid and Elias a Gilg, and you'll hear me saying some other things in the Manx Gaelic, Chinny na Mera, the mother tongue of Ellen Banning, the Isle of Man. As Bannachten de Trish. William Gell has brought us to Kindrochid, Kindrochid meaning Bridgehead, the old part of Onchan village at the Butt, where it was possible to cross the Onchan wetlands between the main road and Banks Howe. So that's why it's Kindrochid, the Bridgehead. And here stands St. Peter's, and we hear of one-time vicar John Howard. Sé dúan firneacht an scíl ferrishain as teaglam na Brothers Grimm, as den dunne seo ech or gelden den Sean Rí trebe ons rede beis, de wei na doltenach de wacherie a Frintseig, ter jit de wei en Rí no ons in a Jane Eyre. Now, back in 1968, Irish singer Johnny McAvoy released a single on the Target label, and this is one of the ones amongst the vinyl in my attic. And we'll hear both sides of that record this evening, starting with the A side, Nora. You'll know the song better as Maggie or When You and I Were Young, Maggie. Tashu Geisjachlish Radio Banning, Stashu Narashun, Viskuller Scalia Mach, Vaidulish, Ellen Banning.
The violets were scenting the woods, Nora displaying their charms to the bee. When I first said I loved only you, Nora, and you said you loved only me. The chestnut blooms gleam through the glade, Nora, a robin sang loud from a tree. When I first said I loved only you, Nora, and you said you loved only me. The golden-robed daffodils shone, Nora, and danced in the breeze on the lea. When I first said I loved only you, Nora, and you said you loved only me. Trees sang a song, Nora, of happier transports to be. When I first said I loved only you, Nora, and you said you loved only me. Never come true, Nora, our dreams were never to be. Since I first said I loved only you, Nora, and you said you loved only me.
Now, when Irish playwright Sean O'Casey wanted a song for Jack Clitheroe, the hero of his play The Plough and the Stars, to sing to his young wife Nora, he just took the already popular parlour ballad about Maggie and changed the name to Nora, and we heard it sung there by Johnny McAvoy. The present church of St Peter's Onchan was built over 3 years, opening in 1833. William Gell is looking at it from the perspective of 1906, so he says, "'Twas here, just by the dear old church, seated on magisterial perch, my honoured sire had swayed the birch." Well, William Gell's father was evidently a schoolmaster near the church. Onchan Infant School was built in 1842 at the bottom of the butt, and that site, if not that building, was to become Welsh House. There was also the Onchan Parish School, built in the butt in 1845, described as being in a low, damp and unhealthy situation, and the whole inadequate in extent. Well, both of these schools closed in 1876 when a new school was built in the Bear Beg, the Little Road, which was to become School Road eventually. It was renamed School Road in Onchan, but the Bear Beg, the Little Road. The Onchan Infant School reopened briefly in 1877 at the request of Onchan's vicar, the Rev John Howard. Well, lots more of him anon, but we'll also get an official glimpse of William Gell's father. I think it was John Gell. Gael rau Juan Firniach cor geldend en Shan Reen a jinnach e fosle Doris a chemers Jerry so loud jouwer, de ligget en Reen no fagen de vis choustai jen chamer shen. Ten rieg en oiltaste de wel shen en ondoris ne rau riu na fosle hon, as they shadow de jinne gian choustai. Les crie trom te Juan Firniach fagen ne wel njaartegge, as they fosle Doris a chemer, ongie te kaasles, je benfrins a fles as ish, choelen, de wel graifi boeregen rieg chalirach uri, as they giri fedeni. Te Juan Firniach greid de wel de chuljuridse kaasles megiet de benfrins, jint as as me saw te korrigen rieg de chorlesh de chulju gauw ser reacht, as de Union Island je de chulju horch, as ne kwegtunnigen de toon se taasjege. Soel as Juan Firniach is een onslung, komrich mar marchenen, as verjeret het rochen de balia on te benfrins a fles A Welsh singer, Eve Goodman, sings the lyrics here about echoing echoes ad laesio with Owain Roberts, who was known as Seindorf, with the cello of Elin Have. Other sounds are by Avon Ogwen and Llyn Padarn. singer Eve Goodman, and Seindorf. Seindorf actually means a band, but is a name that Owain Roberts uses, and we also heard Elin Have on cello. Now, as for Ogwen and Padarn, that's the natural sounds of the river Ogwen, Avon Ogwen, and the lake Padarn, Llyn Padarn, which are in Eryri in North Wales. To Jwan Firiniach, greu de fel de gynesion golgus y fles les sampleren jen yn ynel yn jint aser sy'n apernega, as fyddi de bicerde cor lesio ben prins shiscus the long. Te golsuscus y fles as joris chiver ons close a chastil te chit margin, as te saljig a maagtjien yn ynel yn aser. Te greu de berg ben prins y fles jint maagliau. Tish heen in a veil den ben prins, as tili Gell Jwan Firiniach suscus en schemer. Angie, te salge gemacht den ben prins na ridden storm tege. Tred die shire hersen de chor lesje goed gelje jou en long, te gred de berge kou rauwer trei as na berg remes de loerse schemer, son uljen en een. Ma soort en ben prins gred de genish gol schiescus along. Eis ren Jwan Firiniach die Geli gus en long les boga, as honnik en rie, drauw een eile dek eer na smoe na verne heisje gemaag se gasles. Our inspection of the Onchan Parish School was far from painting a favourable picture of its size and its site, and with the Education Act of 1872 there was a legal requirement to find suitable school accommodation for all children between the ages of 7 and 13. Onchan parishioners appointed a committee to look at sites, but those they suggested were turned down by the Education Board. Now, according to the Rev John Howard at a public meeting in 1874, their series of rejections were without the courtesy of saying why they were being rejected. And to give you an indication of the temperament of the Rev John Howard, he said at a meeting of 1874, "I should just like to say that I have the highest personal respect for each member of the board, but, as a board, I entirely protest against their action. A more incompetent board I don't think ever existed. That's to say, if we're to judge them by their acts. But let that pass. I highly respect them as individuals, but I thoroughly despise them as a board." And there we heard some wonderful driving music, probably appropriate, from the Scottish band Session A9, taking their name from, well, having to drive up and down it so much.
Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Stasiwn yn asiwn tyn ei sio, Radio Fanning, as mas o ffised dy fel geisiach. Rish Radio Fanning, as cartnes she Claare na Gael vis gol as mish the Hebeli, Robert gyda'n Carswell, Robert y Carslach.
Did the ever hear tell of old Bobby Bob?
As de Claare na Gael rechlaas na ris schacht en lukt je gol kriele en chid geert, as Chommers Shen te jint more podcasters te Shen regedden inedege Radio Vanning as vai en rai de podcast jaunies. Now, one of the sites proposed by the Onchan committee was in the Bare Beg, as we've heard, which means the Little Road. For that one, the Education Board did at least say that they felt it was too far away from the village, and the board itself favoured one at St Catherine's. However, the Rev Howard cited a number of reasons why that would be too expensive and also dangerous, being too close to the main road carrying all the traffic through Onchan to Laxey and Ramsey. He wanted to continue with the Bare Beg site, whilst others said that that had already been rejected in the St Catherine's site proposed by the Education Board. And that produced this from the Rev Howard. The board, in the course they'd taken, were usurping authority, and he expressed his opinion that that miserable, wretched muddle of legislation, the Education Act, would never work and would have to be done away with. Nobody could find out what it meant. If they wanted to know one thing, they'd have to look for another. Ren en ri gennachten der ouwe kriege limme soes ege reer Jane ven Frins Goelen. Esch, ren ni drappel soes boer den long, as ren en ri altegei. Ren juwen firnjach tannachten merische stuurde, as hoge serigen son en long de gjolle maag, as doort hij, Jin shina maag ol je na sjaal, de wattige etlach roi grish ushig zijn Maar so ren a ri G&G uljun an een ver as ver. Na gisten, na meeligen, na ushigen, na creaturen fai, as na bein jindesach. Ver immer die uren kout ons G&R ulju, as se tatjen zeg, gedugge wen Frins Gael de rauwen long, gleisje geroi. Trevier G&R en Nies en Jerry, hugge buisten waartjen, as rennie urlu de golde valje rish. Ach, tre henki gus chow long, honneki de rauwed nergemoer, for de vine tolu, as gulroid de blew, as ulju na shoil yint. Now we heard a song by Claire Boucher not long ago. She's from Sarzeau on the Presqu'île de Risse in Brittany and still sings and teaches Breton language and culture whilst living in Canada. The Young Miller, Ach Melinaire Yawank, a Breton traditional song sung by Claire Boucher, a Breton living in Canada. As I say, she's from the Pays Vanité, down on the coast. Ah, Dilly ben Frins, as ish ledden de hatchum. Tammy me vra, as me immerker a soel jorish a barchen shaw. Oh, the raumie en jeden bes, sha tujum von yard egge. A gauwerie greim gin lawik. A stoorte, geneem marchen mish. A grie, as genel mi weg na sinchlan oors ons wushlit. Ter kunte graai huggen meinsterach orm de hans, de wel meer nimmerger soelu jorish kraut. En gidgeert hannik me a castles jeed, hutch me nielu lair. Trachiel ven frinsefles shaw. Henkie de gor barrant smoewansen, as van kriek courage na smoewans forje. De rennie cordeel de hareltach, de git de wei en ven fusiege. Ach, hagere, gouds van fos golde journey ook a boer leen, de ren joen firrenjach, gouds ven de hai ons toyacht en longe kjoliach, fagen 3 vies en vergetlach erskin en ging. Now, the Rev John Howard went on to express his views about the Education Act. It was, he said, a regular hodgepodge of the English, Irish and Scotch Acts, leaving out all the good clauses and retaining all the bad ones. It was the greatest muddle of an act he'd ever known. He'd not met a man yet who could tell what it meant. Mr. Cadman, who was a church warden, Mr. Cadman reminded him that the reporters were taking all this down. The Reverend Howard said that he didn't care. He felt strongly on the subject and was annoyed and would express his feelings. Well, having heard how he expressed his views very forthrightly, let's see how William Gell describes him in the poem, and Gell's father helping him lead the singing in St. Peter's. With sainted Howard led the chant, the athletic parson, ministrant, and type of Christ's church militant, with milk of kindness brimming o'er, ne'er turned the needy from his door, but shared his broth-pot with the poor. Well, we've heard examples of his athletic militant stance, but he was notably philanthropic. Now, I should say, I mentioned before about possibly John Gell being the father of William Gell. I'm not sure about that, but there was a letter that was reproduced in an article about this dispute about about where the new school was going to be built. Was it going to be in the Bearbeg in Onchan or not? And at that time there was a letter, and I thought at first it was from John Gell as the secretary to the Onchan parishioners who'd come together in a committee to look at different sites, but then it seems it was John Gell writing to them on behalf of the Board of Education, so perhaps it's a different John Gell. So I just wonder whether that was the John Gell, the father of, relating to education, but it may be a false steer, I'm afraid. Now, for the project Mona's Isle, the legacy of Mona Douglas, Greg Jochen took one of Mona's poems, confusingly called Song, and he set it along with some of his own thoughts, and he found a jazzy tune to go with it all.
There's a kind of beauty in the world's great cities. The neon from the tower blocks particularly pretty. And gliding on his eagle where the crooked street's illegal, we're staying in the city in the night. The spirit of his provenance is fabulously busy. He's the finest fellow now, the best that's in, or is he? He glides in on his eagle where the crooked street's illegal. He's singing in the city in the night. But these waves that wash our shores in the ever, in the splashing of the oars, as the small boats leaving, the essence and the soul and the heart of the music to me. Surely there There is romance in a rainbow when the sunny skies are sweeping, a subtle kind of comfort in the rainstorms sweeping. Fly high, eagle, when the cricket and the eagle singing in a city when it's raining in the night. But these waves that wash our shores in the evening, splashing up the oars when the small birds leave it, the essence and the soul and the heart of the music to me. Shores in the evening, the splashing of the oars when the small boats leaving, the essence and the soul and the heart of the music to me.
Greg Jochen with Fabulous City, one of the songs from the Mona's Isle, the Legacy of Mona Douglas project, which was suggested by Liz and Dave McLean back in 2012, and I think it was very successful. Canon John Gelling's A History of the Manx Church gives a pen portrait of John Howard. Howard was, in character, a strange mixture, generous to a fault. He was always ready to help weakness and distress. He was very unconventional and completely lacked the discretion of his father, Rector Howard of Balaff, nor did he share his father's very evangelical views. This lack of discretion overclouded his outstanding gifts. He was a conservative and a traditionalist, and was out of sympathy with his time. His charming personality made him loved, but his kindness to others sometimes took the form of condescension, and this was disliked. He had a fearless spirit and a manly independence, refusing to bow down to men of power. And we've heard a taste of that already, of course. And he'd been born in 1817, becoming vicar of Onchan in 1847, and holding that office until his death in 1892. However, during that time there were, well, shall we put it, rather unusual events which we'll have a look at. Eis rendiwn ffyrniach sgwr fai ciola, as fe geisdiach rish na fod dy greu, yn dere ie rish yn Gael, no, drawi tigl na fi sio mai dy lŵr. Dili ich hyd Ai, Onchan tygl benfrins y fles Te, drega yn Ach, chaneli yng ngedyn ni dy saws y ffos. As dwrt yn tras ti egen na iau, ti na sail yorish along. Ti na sail yorish along. Eis loren chyderish. Crenacht ni shen kuna. Tret a chit a tolu, ni kabel choraya shinnach lima hook. Eis ni yn ri coreb gol moonega. As me visse chitlesh, ni yn kabel iri merish sus an na jene arach fagen de bent hwsi rish. Vraya nafi, na vel cawrer bion. O te, my bis dunyelia gol moonega de blew, as te goil a gun lawega as a fine, as te liga marwa kabel lesh, near sawela rieg. A quoyek de fissa sen. And that was a musical evocation of part of the Cornish landscape and part of the seascape, played by the band Pisky Lead. The first tune was John Mills's tune on Caur Carngalba, the giant of Carngalba, and then we heard Ennis Ruin, the Seal Island, which is southwest of St Ives, and that one was written by Pisky Lead's, the Pisky that leads Pisky Lead, and whistle player Katie Lauer. Sure dat stasiwn yn asiwn sian dy greis on sigaris radio fanning. Rys yn sure, sé Claare na Gael to the class in Cartnish, mer yn pin Robert Catin Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Ever heard tell of old Bobby Bob?
Hi a fi As eschen as the fissegge as the gin away. Heg eschen de vei mor clach vai mer chosje gus glún. Esch doet an ta fisse mer na smoon shen. We wis a kabel marwich, chabi an ri eg shiger ori eg a tre shen, shiger ge tre shen, machjone ven fusi egge. Tret had rosh na chastjel, bi ljene dunje bandje jint, as na lai on shen ons mail. As ne a gien de vei fiet olju as as urgage. Ach, vis de fear as sulphur as pick, as ma vis e kormoshi, ne a lost egg as smur na krawen egge. Doort het trasvie, ne wel kaurer bi? O, te drege an Ma vis dunje elje, as e kjau lauwen trogel nisel jene, as de kjau nail, de wel e lost, esch bi a ri eg livreid. A krein acht ni shenkuna, eschen de fissege as de ginaway, bi a chindeet gus klach vain chriege gus a liun. Esch lora tras ta fissem force na smoon a shen. Now William Gell notes that his father assisted the Reverend John Howard in the singing in St Peter's, with Sainted Howard led the chant. Canon Gelling says of John Howard that in 1880 he remarked that when he came to Onchan in 1847 there wasn't a single psalm chant sung in any church on the island, nor was there any choral service until he started them. The service was just a dialogue between the parson and the clerk, who was the mouthpiece of the silent congregation. It seems to be possibly that earlier tradition that William Gell is referring to then. Canon Gelling describes John Howard's fierce disputes and loss of control on occasions. We heard the name of Mr. Cadman, the church warden, earlier on, but an argument led to the Reverend Howard assaulting Mr. Cadman with a walking stick. And the following day from the pulpit he said that if it happened again he'd get worse. And for this he was bound over by the High Bailiff to keep the peace on his own surety, but he refused to accept any money and therefore was imprisoned until surety was paid anonymously. Now the B-side of Johnny McAvoy's Nora was a song called Tari Flynn. And Tari Flynn was the title character of a book by Irish poet and novelist Patrick Kavanagh, and it was published as a novel in 1948, later made into a play for the Abbey Theatre. Now, Shea Healy digested the story about Tari Flynn from Monaghan on the family farm, and he distilled it into 3 short verses and a chorus.
That I should be spared such a life of drudgery, of digging clay, tossing cocks of hay, wishing all the day that somehow I could be free. Oh, you're a rascal, Tari Flynn, you're writing poetry instead of digging drills, strolling around the fields all day. Won't you ever work or won't you ever stay? Oh, mother, can't you see that the farmer's life, it was never meant for me to reap and sow? I don't want to know, but to Dublin go, for that's where my life should be. Oh, you're a rascal, Tari Flynn, you're writing poetry instead of digging drills, strolling around the fields all day. Won't you ever work or won't you ever stay? Don't come to say goodbye, mothers always cry. Shake my hand and set me free when fame has come to my Dublin home. Maybe then you'll come there someday and visit me. Oh, you're a rascal, rascal Charlie Flynn, you're writing poetry instead of digging drills. Strolling around the fields all day, won't you ever work or won't you ever stay? Oh, you're a rascal Charlie Flynn, you're writing poetry instead of digging drills. Strolling around the fields all day, won't you ever work or won't you ever stay?
Johnny McAvoy singing Shea Healy's lyrics, which distill the story of Patrick Kavanagh's novel Tari Flynn, reluctantly working on the family farm in Monaghan, but actually longing to go and write for a living in Dublin. It's set to a version of a traditional tune, which is Fallingeen Vian, the Munster shawl, sometimes known as, well, quite often known as the Spanish shawl, in fact, either a long way from Monaghan, even Munster, never mind Spain. Now, in addition to a series of fierce verbal arguments and disputes, in 1877, John Skillicorn was someone else who was beaten about the face and head by the Rev John Howard. He was in court for this, and Howard dismissed something that the prosecutor, Arthur Lawton, had said. He said it was a lie, so he was imprisoned for contempt of court. Meanwhile, there was concern for John Howard's mental health, and although other doctors couldn't agree, Dr. John Clegg of Castletown, the famous Dr. Clegg, was called in, and the result of that was that John Howard was committed to the mental asylum at Ballamona in April 1877, and he stayed there until August of 1877. Canon Gelling says that he'd started family prayers in the asylum and was much loved by the other patients. He was greeted with great delight on his return to Onchan, and the church bell was rung for an hour. Well, even so, that wasn't the end of the disputes he got into with individuals, so Canon Gelling's description of his lack of discretion was a constant in his character, though he was obviously very highly thought of by many people. Eer tret a lena dunje banche lost, doet de trasvi. Chanel rí siige Jane ven na fúsi den gamaleshel. Ir tret aliena dunje banche lásh doet een trasvi. Chanel rí siige Jane ven fúsi ege. Tre ege banish de toyach chit der gauns, as den ven rein eg downsen. Neis dal tajem chit de vei glas nielu, as tujem gesalair, maar de bechi maru. As Manuel Peir enjach trogel nisi, as Gael 3 bainan folle Jane Geer yeshek, ni ish gethen bes. Ach, eschen as de fissegge, so, as de ginaway, higge de vei klaag, vai klagge gjonegge, gus boin na chasje. Treven a fee a lord ma so, na mast oxen, dettel a der soel. Wat you en firrenjach klaas nulju je shaw, as vai en tre shen, renne tannachten na horses trimshach. No de renne smuljen rechien, de rawe de vollige, na vei a glaasjen vai manchege, de jinnach drag ei chit er beon. Chit de beon, as de rawe de huisje gemach, de bergen vjoes heen kuiltegge. Now, we've heard several versions of a Welsh song about a little lad of a tinker. It's a well-known song in English too, probably from New York originally, with its reference to the Knickerbocker line. But it's also collected here in the island in its English version as Jenny is all the go. Bach gen bach o dinker, and is paired with the tune Nith the Gog, the cuckoo's nest, and is performed by Olion Biw. The duo Olion Bew with Lucy Rivers on fiddle and vocals and Dan Lawrence on guitar. The Knickerbocker line that's mentioned there was Brooklyn and Manhattan. It links originally horse bus, then trams, then a subway line. Ach verjere doet June Firniach tjoustai Jason heen. Nim sa wel me baasje, gaide jinnum gerrichten. Me saw tre henkert gus a tollu, hagere kat mar wa fashions jint egna fee. Ren limme hoyacht, kabel storme geraie shinnach. Ta rod dotterie, nie emmerke me gus a gastjel. Well, it's time to leave the butt in Onchan, and William Gell leads the way back up to the main road and turning right to go northward, passing, in fact, the junction with the Bearbeg, the little road that's now School Road, and we go onwards down into the dip at the Groudle River, and that'll be our starting point in William Gell's 1906 poem Man in Veg Bean, a poetical sketch of the Isle of Man. As Shene as Masota fame furchten dera nachir nish. From 7 to 9 we can enjoy the best in chill-out music for your Sunday evening with Chris Pearson, and at 9 o'clock Judith Lay will be your host for sundown through until Monday morning. Claare and Gael comes to an end with the Tom Campbell Trio playing tunes written by Tom Campbell himself, and we hear the flute of Tom Campbell, the guitar of Gilly O'Flaherty, and the bodhrán of Callum Conboy. Next Friday evening, the 4th of April, Shanachas Stew has its first public event starting at 6:15 in Ramsey Masonic Hall. Then there's 2 full days of events on Saturday the 5th and Sunday the 6th, mainly at venues in Ramsey, but on Sunday afternoon there's a concert in the Peel Centenary Centre at 3 o'clock. Lots of visiting performers as well as the island's own very talented contingent. Ach, verjere halt and treyer jit. So until the next time then, this is Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslag.
Old Bobby Bob.
Wishing you a very good night. Eve I'm a chriort, as me Yeri and Shedut.